My name is Chris. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing Leetcode problem 463 island perimeter with JavaScript. It's considered an easy problem. Okay, I'm not even going to read all this. Honestly, if we look at this diagram and look at the examples, if I explain that, it's easier to understand than this kind of story they put out there. So our input is going to be a 2D array. And the nested arrays, or the arrays inside of the outer arrays, right, are going to contain ones and zeros. And so the story is that's going to represent, this is going to be represented by this diagram here. So all the zeros are going to be blue squares, all the ones are going to be this, we're just going to call them orange squares, right? So this is the first row, this is the second row, this is the third row, this is the fourth row, right? So you have 0, 1, 0, 0, blue, orange, blue, blue, 1, 1, 1, 0, orange, 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 blue, so on and so forth. So that's how that works. What we're trying to do is we're trying to find the perimeter. Okay, so basically any side of the orange square that what's next to it, if it's not an orange square, that's considered perimeter, right? I think that explaining it like that is key, like saying not an orange square as opposed to saying a blue square. And the reason why I say that is because this is a perimeter, right? There's no blue square up here, there's no square at all, but there's also not an orange square. So if there's not an orange square next to that, it's considered a perimeter, right? So, you know, for this one here, this is a perimeter, this is a perimeter, this is a perimeter, and this is not a perimeter, right? If we look at this example here, they really try to highlight it by putting those that black box there. So, right, so for this square, none of the sides are a perimeter. For this square here, this side is not a perimeter, but the other sides, all the other sides are. So we're counting all those up, right? So if you count all the yellow lines up, which is the perimeter, you get 16, and that's the output. For these two examples, you could imagine all this is just an orange square, right? So all the sides are going to be a perimeter, so it's 4. If we look at this, that would be the equivalent of just having that and that, right? And so all the sides of the orange square would be perimeter, so we have an output of 4. Hopefully that makes sense. So how can we do this? Well, essentially what we need to do is we need to, every time we come to a 1, right, we're going to set up a loop, right? Actually a nested loop. The outer loop is going to direct us to each of these nested arrays, right? So our outer loop is going to be grid.length, right? It's going to execute grid.length times, right? So the first time it's going to be looking at this array, second time this array, third this time this array, fourth this array, right? Then the inner loop will look at the individual numbers within that array, right? So while we're doing that, we're going to check to see, first of all, is the number a 1, right? If it's not a 1, we don't do anything, right? If it's a 1, then what we need to do is we need to check this number and this number, right? So if this number is not a 1, we increment, well, first of all, I left this out. We're going to create a variable at the very beginning called sides, and it's going to be a value of 0, right? So every time we're at 1 and we check to see one of the sides, if it's not 1, we increment that variable sides, right? So we're at this 1. We look to the left. It's not a 1, so we increment sides by 1. We look to the right. It's not a 1, so we increment sides by 1. We look above it. So basically, the previous array at the same index. There is no previous array, so we increment 1. And then we check the following array at the same index, index 1. It is a 1, so we don't increment 1. Okay? I'll do this with one more, and then we'll start writing some code, right? So then once we get to, the next two numbers, we don't do anything because they're zeros. Then we go to the next array. The outer loop goes to the next array. We got a 1. Okay. We check to the left to see if there is a 1 next to it. There isn't, so we increment 1. We check to the right to see if there's a 1 next to that. There is, so we don't do anything. Then we check the previous array at the same index, right? Index 0. It's a 0, it's not a 1, so we increment 1, right? Then we check the following array at the same index. It's a 0, not a 1, so we increment 1. So for this 1, we're going to get increment size by 3, okay? And we keep going until we're done. All right, so let's grab this. Hold on a second. Yep. Let's grab actually, you know what I'm going to do before we do that? I'm just going to grab this. Move over to CodePen. Create our variable. Let's create our function. I'm going to call it func. And we're going to create a variable called size. This is what we're going to increment every time we check what's next to our 1 and we see it's not a 1. Set that to 0. And at the end of the day, we're going to return size. Okay. So, before we get too far in the weeds on this, there is an edge case that's basically going to cause, oh, I spelled function wrong. Nice. There we go. There is an edge case that's going to cause us some headaches. And I want to take care of that right away. And that edge case is simply if grid.length, if there's only one array in this array, that's going to cause us some issues with the code we write for this situation. So in the case that we just have our grid, it has an array length of 1, we just need one loop, okay? And we're just going to say if grid.length equals 1. So this code is only going to execute in this unique situation. So if this array, right, if it includes a 1, we know that you're automatically going to have size is going to be incremented by 2, right? Because to this side and this side, you're going to increment sides, right? So there's no 1 over here, there's no 1 over here, so we automatically get 2. That's going to be true in this case, right? That's going to be true in this case. In this case. Oh, and I left something out too. Let's go back to the diagram. This is very important. And this is one reason why it does help to read this description, I suppose. But you're never going to have a situation where you have, let's say we have this, and then we also have an orange square down here. That is not in any of the test cases. So we don't need to worry about that. Same thing, like let's imagine that all the outer squares were orange and all the inner squares were blue. That'll never happen either, okay? So they're always going to be bunched together like this, right? So this is never going to be a blue square. You're never going to have that situation, so you don't need to worry about that. So if we come back over here, right? So what I mean by that is you're never going to have like this. That's never going to be, it's not in any of the test cases. So that being said, we know that if grid at 0, right, because it's the first array within grid, if that includes a 1, we're just going to automatically increment sides by 2, right? Because we know that no matter what's inside here, if there's a 1 in there, there's going to be a situation where to the left of the 1, it's not a 1, and to the right of the 1, it's not a 1, right? That's always going to be the case. So we automatically increment sides by 2. Then all we need to do is we need to count the number of 1s, and every time we see a 1, we increment by 2 again, because what's above and below, there is nothing, so there's no 1s. So then we can say, well, let's use the map function. I didn't use that before, but why not? I like to use methods whenever possible. So nope, we don't want to use that. There's a reason why I didn't use that. So let I equal 0. And then we can say if I is less than, what did I do wrong here? Oh, sorry, it's early today and my coffee hasn't kicked in. So if I is less than grid at 0, can't just say grid, right? Because we're looking inside this nested array. Grid at 0 dot length. We're going to increment I. And then we can simply say if grid at 0 at I, if that equals 1, we're going to again increment sides by 2, right? And we get 6, right? And that's correct, right? Because if you imagine this is a diagram, this is a perimeter, this is a perimeter, so 2, this is a perimeter, this is perimeter 4, this is a perimeter, this is a perimeter 6, right? Cool. So that takes care of that. The reason we need to do that is for the logic we're going to write for every other situation, if grid is greater than 1, right? If you check what's above and what's below it, you're going to get an error. So it's easiest just to get this out of the way. And the other thing too is we don't, if we use this logic, we don't want to use the logic that we're about to write, so we're going to return right away inside the if statement. And we can see that that's working by just erasing this, right? Cool. Okay, so now let's write all the code for if grid is greater than 1, right? So we don't need an if statement because this logic is going to return here, and then we're going to leave the function altogether. So now this is, so again, there's going to be, let's grab a different variable to grab this one. Cool. Okay, so first thing what we need to do is, like I said, there's 4 situations in which we're going to increment sides. If there's no 1 to the left of a 1, to the right of the 1, in the previous array at the same index, and at the following array at the same index. So previous array at the same index, following array at the same index. Now, there is 2 edge cases here. If you're in the very first array, if we try to check a previous array, you're going to get an error, right? So, and the same is going to be true for the last array, right? So if we check to see what's in the next array, you're going to get an error. So the way we can handle this is we can have like 3 different chunks of code. We can say, if we're in the grid array at 0, we're just going to check to the left and the right and the following, and if we see 1, we're going to automatically increment 1, right? Because there's nothing in front of it, so we know it's going to get 1 up here. If you're thinking back to that diagram, right? We automatically know if you're in here, if you see an orange square, the top is going to be a perimeter, right? And then the same thing is going to be true for the last array, right? So if we see an orange square, we know what's underneath it is automatically going to be a perimeter. We don't need to check down here, and if you try to check, you're going to get an error. So what we can do is we can write an if else statement that says if you're in the first array, we're going to just check left, right, next array, and then automatically increment 1 for the top, for what's before it. And then we can have an else if statement that checks what's in the previous array at the same index, to the left, to the right, and then automatically increment 1 for what would be the following array, right? And then we can have an else statement that's going to check all 4 sides. So left, right, previous array at the same index, following array at the same index. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, this probably will help you understand what I'm saying here. So we have to have a nested for loop. I'm going to say if I is less than grid dot length plus plus. And so what this is going to do is this is going to target each of these inner arrays, right? So if I console.log this, we'll have grid at I, right? Here's the first inner array, second one, third, fourth, right? And then we're going to have another for loop. Call it J. And here we want to say grid at 0 dot length J plus plus. The reason why I'm doing that, if you look at these test cases here, notice that, you know, grid, the length of grid is 1, but then the length of the inner array is 2. So those can be different. The one thing that I discovered from doing this is each of the nested arrays will always be the same length. So we can take comfort in that. But that's why here you need to use the 0. All right, so let's console .log grid at I at J. Okay, so now what you're seeing is you're seeing all the individual numbers, and it's basically reading from left to right. See what I mean? 0. This is the return from the previous console.log. So we're really starting here. So 0, 1, 0, 0, 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, 1, 0, so on and so forth. So that's good because we can loop through that, and then we can check to the left and the right. So we have all that established. But now how are we going to check the previous array, right? That's where it becomes a little bit confusing. Well, if you do this, if you swap these, actually no, this won't help us. Nope, I'm not even going to bring that up because that makes it more confusing. Okay, so we can basically say, like I said, what we want to start for the first thing we want to do is remember we're going to do an if else statement to handle those three cases, whether we're in the first array, the last array, or somewhere in between. So the first one is just going to say if I equals 0. So if I equals 0, we're in that first array, right? And then we can say another if statement. We can say if grid at I at j equals 1. Okay, then we're going to do some stuff. So why do we do that? Well, because wait, did I leave something out? No, I didn't. Okay, we're good. Because we're not, if it's a 0, if the number's a 0, we don't do anything, right? So we just ignore it. So we can put that in there to kind of keep it a little bit more organized. And, you know, actually, I'm going to set this up for all of them. Else if, and we're going to say I equals grid dot length minus 1. So that's if we're in the last array, right? And then here we're just going to say else. So these will be all the ones in between. And then for, I should have done this too, we still need to say if grid I at j equals 1. Same thing here, because we're only going to be checking, doing anything at all, if we get a 1, right? I j equals 1. Okay. So, if we're in the first array, we can automatically well, if it equals 1, we automatically increment sides, right? And why isn't that working? Oh, it is. Just, I'm just weird. Slow down for a second. Because we know that there is not a 1 above it. There is not a 1 at the previous index before it, because there is no previous array, right? So when we get to this 1, we automatically increment sides. Same thing's going to be true down here for these, right? So we're not going to check the following array, so we can if we see a 1, we can automatically increment 1. So now you're seeing 3 because we're seeing this here, we're incrementing 1, we're seeing this here, incrementing 1, this incrementing 1. Okay? Then we need to check to the left and the right of each one. So we can say if grid I and then j minus 1, if that doesn't equal 1, right? Sides. Ooh, I screwed up. Hold on, back up. That was going to be a big problem. Was it going to be a problem? No, that was right. I'm sorry. I questioned myself. That's definitely wrong. I at j minus 1, if that doesn't equal 1, sides plus plus. Cool. So now what this is doing is in this first array, it's looking to the left, you know, j minus 1. So it's looking over here, it's saying, is that 1? It's not, so we increment sides. Then we look to the other side, right? So we're just going to copy this and change this to plus, right? So now it's looking in the other direction, okay? So it's looking here, minus 1, plus 1, right? So right now we have 5 because this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? Eventually, oh, I should have put this in here. Our result should be 16. So let's just put there so we don't forget it. Okay. Now this is going to be the case for all of these, right? In every single outer, you know, in this big if, else statement, this is always going to be the case that we're checking to the left and the right. So we can copy this, paste it here, and then we can do the same here. Now we have 11, so let's make sure that's correct, right? So let's start with these default increment of sides, right? So in this array, when we see 1, we just add 1. So we've got 1, 2, 3. Now we go to every single one and look to the left and the right and see if it's 1. If it's not, we increment sides. So we've got 3, 4, 5, and then we're coming here, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. And that's what we got. We got 11. And so, what do we have left to do? Okay, so first thing we need to do is we need to set up, we need to look at the following array. So for in this first array, we get to this one, we need to look to the following array at the same index, and we need to check and see if that's 1. Okay, how do we do that? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this again. Now we're looking at the same index at the following array. So we want the same j, but we want increment I. And we should still see 11, and we do, because that is going to be a 1 as well. And then we do the opposite for this else if, right? Because that is looking at this one, we need to look at the previous. So now we can paste this in there, but we want to say, and there's that error. Wait, hold on. Let's look at that real quick. Oh crap. There's that error I was talking about, right? So that's going to cause an error if you. That's why we have to do all this, right? It's kind of a pain, but right here, what it's doing is it's looking for another array. It doesn't exist, so you get an error. But anyways, we're looking for the previous here, so we change that to minus. Now we get 12. Why is that? We had 11, but now we're here, and we come to this one. We look at the previous array. It's not a 1, so we increment by 1, so we get 12. We get to this one. We look at the previous array. It is a 1. We don't do anything. Finally, we need to go do both of these if checks in the final else statement, right? Because when we're here, we're going to look at previous array and the following array. So we can grab these two if statements, throw them down here, copy this. We should see 16. We do. Okay, that's a lot, but that is the solution. Let's go ahead and grab all the logic. Let's go back over to Leetcode. Let's format our code. Let's run the tests. Pass all the tests. Let's submit. All right, success. Beats 47%. I usually like to be at least over 50, but I'm gonna take it. All right, hopefully you found this this video enjoyable and helpful. If you did, please like it. It helps my channel grow. And if you'd like to see more like these, please like and subscribe to my channel. See you again real soon.